So this psychedelic stock was up over 70% last week based on recent news. Who was it? Find out in our latest podcast. This is the Dales Report. I'm happy to be joined with the CEO of Small Pharma. Back to the podcast here today. Peter Rands joins us. Peter, it's been a while. How are things?
Yeah, good, Chad. Thanks very much for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to see and hear from you. I heard that you made a trip over to Toronto, Canada last week. What'd you think of the big city?
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. Sunshine. It's I can't believe it's the first time we've been there. We've been listed there for 6 months.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the overall sentiment you find? I know this industry's been a little stale from an investment standpoint. I'm finding a lot of conversations having over the past couple of weeks is there's some strong momentum building here in the fall. But I'd first like to ask you, you flew to Canada last week, obviously met with quite a few people. What was the overall, feedback and sentiment based on your trip and what you're hearing about your company and the industry as a whole?
A lot of people are still talking about psychedelics and, a lot of sort of when rather than if discussions. People are waiting for data. People are waiting for, deals. We sort of saw how it went last year. I think, there were some catalysts around about this time last year that really helped the industry.
Yeah.
And, I think momentum is building.
Yeah. Do you see that happening again here in the fall? Another catalyst moment? Because there's some, I know it's tough to obviously predict that, but you got a big conference coming up. There could be some big announcements. In addition to that, you've got Compass with their endpoints around the corner as well. But a lot of feedback that we get is people are, they just want to know, they want to find out information. If they're positive results, what does this mean for the overall industry, which obviously is going to be a positive thing. Do you not think?
Yeah, definitely. I think, if you look at public markets together with private markets, there probably will be, continued appetite, I'd expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's moving to the efficacy data. Investigator-led trials are being published now. The audience is waiting.
Yeah. Well, great week for you last week. Stock was up over 70%. Why was it? Well, there was some big announcement that was made, particularly the one that you made involving being granted an innovation passport designation for SPL026. And for those watching, it's your lead candidate for DMT-assisted therapies for the treatment of major depressive disorder. So walk us through what the designation means for SPL026 and your overall research portfolio.
Well, the designation is a new initiative by the MHRA to help fast track innovative new medicines. There aren't many that have been issued yet. I think we're the first company to receive one in mental health.
Which is great.
Yeah. And so what it really seeks to do is align the key stakeholders in the development of a medicine. So that would be the MHRA, NICE, the EMA, I think, various regulatory bodies who, oversee the development of medicines. And, in particular, this helps us work out patient access and, the best and swiftest ways to get this into the market once we've got efficacy and, clear safety and tolerability.
What's it like? MDRA, for those watching, is equivalent in the UK as it is to the FDA in the US, but are they very supportive, you find, working with them as far as, the right conditions, as far as the overall growth of what you're trying to research on? Yeah,
we have found them to be very receptive. They're very data-driven. The data has, really got a lot of people excited. So we've found so far the MHRA has been, quite, very supportive. And this ILAP designation, the innovation passport, is another indicator of that.
Well, I bring that up because, what I'm learning quickly is some of the best research in psychedelics globally is coming out of the UK. And you talk about some of the people involved, Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris, your team, yourself, even Dr. David Nutt. Do you not find, right now, as far as, the growth of this industry, that some of the best research is coming out of the UK?
Yeah, and I think we have Imperial College to thank for that. They're Center for Psychedelic Research, which was set up by David Nutt and Robin Carhart-Harris, and our chief investigator, David Arizzo, is one of the key guys there. And there are a number of other reasons for it. Our regulators are receptive. Compass also, started their regulatory and clinical development here in this country. So I think we have got a sort of scientific head start. And I mean, this is being picked up as well by politicians. And just recently, a kind of call has been put out to the Prime Minister, to Boris Johnson, to take a look at the schedule of psilocybin in the face of this evidence that psilocybin has medicinal properties. And we think that, once we've got efficacy data, which will come out midway through next year, we'll be able to put the same sort of proposition to, the people in charge.
It's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it really is.
I know you touched on this in some detail, so true or false, is the innovation passport designation roughly equivalent to the special access program? And, for those that are watching, that means selected users are granted access to psilocybin in an end-of-life or terminal case scenario. So saying this, is it equivalent?
It's not equivalent, no. So it is closer, I think, to the fast-track designation that the FDA has granted certain medicines. I suspect that this designation would be no bad thing. Would probably be an advantage in seeking special access mechanisms in the UK, or once we expand our trials into other countries. But no, they're not equivalent. No.
A couple days before the big news of last week, you announced that the first patient has been dosed in your phase 2A clinical trial for your DMT lead candidate, SPL026, in combination with psychotherapy. So as I'm learning, the study has become your lead pipeline candidate and is really among the most advanced studies for DMT-assisted therapy anywhere on the planet. So how does one, I guess, achieve this milestone? I know it's a pretty broad question, but there's a lot of work that obviously goes behind the scenes when being granted something like this.
Wow, yeah. How do we get here? Well, I mean, we spent several years learning about depression, starting from 2006 through to 2018, 19. In 2019, we manufactured our pre-GMP batch of DMT, and that was to ensure the ways that we handled the drug were of high enough quality for the production of a medicine. That went really well, and in 2020 we submitted the clinical trial application to conduct a phase 1 trial, which was completed last month, and that leads straight into this patient study, which started last week. We can now, by the end of this week, the first patient will have had their first follow-up, and that in itself is a key milestone. And we're now moving through to anticipated end dates for this study of first half of next year.
First half of next year, okay. And then I guess where do you go if you do receive positive endpoint data?
Phase 2B.
Phase 2B. Keeping it simple, right?
So what it would be a more complex study that would look at a number of different paradigms, but it would enroll in the order of 200, maybe 220 patients, and would study this medicine at scale.
Well, DMT, as I've learned a little bit, even through Dr. Carol Rutledge, that's been on a few times, for the one going through a psychedelic journey, like this is in comparison to psilocybin, something that you can go through within 30 minutes versus, say, psilocybin versus 6 to 8 hours. One of the big questions within this industry when getting therapy is the overall cost and the psychotherapy involved with the 6 to 8 hour, time frame going through something like that. So for those still trying to piece together and try to understand, what would you say, and I don't know if advantages is the right word, but the differences between DMT versus, say, psilocybin that gets a lot of attention and the opportunity DMT brings? What would you say to that?
I mean, the main advantage for DMT for us is clinical flexibility. So, to compare side by side with a psilocybin-assisted therapeutic regime, that is, rigidly 6 to 8 hours within the clinical setting, and all of the infrastructure needs to kind of work alongside that, kind of that rigid timescale. It's too early to say whether we would be able to significantly reduce overall therapeutic time, but the time in the clinic is certainly significantly reduced. And the first patient that we dose will have received 2 sessions in still a fraction, perhaps a quarter of the time overall taken to administer 1 psilocybin session. So really it is all about clinical flexibility and trying to optimize through to that best clinical outcome.
That's important to learn. And I know I asked this question earlier. Overall, though, you do feel like the government has been like an ally with the overall research and growth for the industry within the UK?
Overall, look,
trick question.
I've said before, perhaps on this show, that the UK government is slightly more progressive than it's given credit.
Okay.
Introduced the Psychoactive Substances Act in 2014, 15, and
yeah,
I think that was a step in the right direction. But there are still a number of steps that still need to be taken before the psychedelic medicines can receive their true research potential, and those changes are still being worked through. Once a company like Small Pharma has set up a supply chain that sits within the regulations of the UK, it is actually quite a supportive regulatory regime. So, for example, each time we open up a new site, the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle is to get the relevant controlled drugs license updated, amended, or applied for, and that they always respond swiftly, but it's always the last piece. So, I wouldn't complain about them on a global sort of comparative scale, no.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I asked that question just because with the research that is being conducted and the kind of current times that we're dealing with, I know here in North America as well, there's a lot of obviously cities and states that are starting to decriminalize and open up with the whole idea, knowing the results that this industry is starting to prove. Still a long ways to go, but it's all based in the data, and the data that we're starting to pull from a lot of this stuff is just, it's very telling how positive and the hope for the entire industry and for people that need this right now in comparison to what we've been dealing with. But I assume it's the same kind of thing that you're dealing with over in the UK as far as mental health, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is a huge need, but a huge increase in sort of access to the hope that this, nascent industry is beginning to deliver.
Right.
It's still on the order of hundreds of patients. This year, a few hundred patients will have been dosed in one or other psychedelic clinical trial, and that's a start. Hopefully next year it will be thousands, and the year after that it will be tens of thousands. And can't happen quickly enough.
No, I know. I hear you. Well, listen, I know you're busy. I appreciate you connecting with us here today, but congrats, obviously, on the announcements from last week. Stock performance performed very, very strong, and needless to say, you continue to walk down that path as being a global leader with DMT research, and I applaud with what you're doing, and I wish you, obviously, the best of success with these trials moving forward, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chad.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate your time.
You too.